I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Thursday, August 18th, 2022. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. As always, I want to invite you to join us in creating connections with our community locally, globally. Our objective here is simply to have conversation, to talk, to say what's on our mind, to value what we think and what we know, and to build on our capacity to be critical in our analysis of all the situations, in our desire to be creative, to be artistic, and our desire to be humane, and to reflect and reveal and walk in a way of a completion, in a way of sovereignty, in a way of dignity, in a way that expresses the value that we place in ourselves, in our relationship with the Creator, with creation itself. So today, I call this show on Thursday a conversation with companions, and I mean that in the sense of people that have known each other for a long time. In the case of most people here, but even in the people that are new, they enter the conversation with a sense of having been in the work of building community for a long, long time. And therefore, if we just met a minute ago, the experiences we bring into our conversation reflects lifetimes of knowledge, of learning, of growing, and of aspirations. So I want to begin by once again referring to the fact that yesterday was Marcus Garvey Day, the birthday of Marcus Garvey. And we published in Insight News in the paper that's coming up a statement, sort of a very plain statement on who Marcus Garvey was. And I want you to check that out. I'll put a link to it in the chat or share it in the notes, and you can download and look at that. But also, I presented that because yesterday, the people over at Narrative in Nubia launched a petition to free Marcus Garvey, or to pardon Marcus Garvey. Let me show that to you now and share that with you. As a matter of fact, I'll bring it on the screen. So this is it. And this is something that I pulled from the page of Narrative with the K, KNARRATIVE.com. And it's a post or position or petition started by Karen Hunter, who's the principal, one of the principals in creating this. And I just want to share this with you. Could have read it to you as background. Marcus Mosiah Garvey inspired every major Black movement of the 20th century. He fought for the liberation of his people. Now is the time for us to fight for him. Clear his name. Free Marcus Garvey now. Marcus Garvey galvanized a movement of millions spanning the globe. For his efforts, he was a target of the United States government. In 1922, Garvey was arrested and charged with mail fraud. It is widely known to be trumped up charges, but those charges led to a conviction and a 5-year jail sentence. In 1925, a petition was circulated to free Garvey. It got 70,000 signatures, which was enough to pressure President Calvin Coolidge to commute Garvey's sentence. Coolidge added deportation as a stipulation. Garvey returned to Jamaica, but his name was forever tarnished. And now Karen Hunter writes in this petition, you have an opportunity, we have an opportunity to help clear his name. So she are asking you, she as I am, we're asking you to sign this petition and ask President Joe Biden to posthumously pardon Marcus Garvey. Parenthetically, the previous president cleared the name of Jack Johnson before leaving office. So President Biden can do the same for Marcus Garvey. Up you mighty race, accomplish what you will. One of the famous iconic statements, proverbial statements of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And so right now, this form says that 3,168 people have signed this petition. Their goal is to get to 5,000. I think once they get 5,000, they'll have a goal of 7,000, then a goal of 10,000. What would happen if 100,000 people signed this petition? So I'm asking you to think about it and take the next step. Sign up I'll put the link to this article in the chat. Or in fact, maybe Vosh, you can take that from the top and post it, or I can do that. But we want you to check out Marcus Garvey. Well, Yusef Mgeni, you and I were saying before the show that Marcus Garvey means so much to our people. He was one of the greatest organizers of all time. Let me have you weigh in on that.
Al, we could spend an hour just clearing up some of the misinformation about Marcus Garvey. He was convicted of mail fraud for selling shares in the Black Star steamship line for 25 cents each in the U.S. mails. That's the surface piece. Beneath the surface, there was a young white lawyer who graduated from law school, went to work for the Justice Department, and his sole assignment was to frame Marcus Garvey, to get the goods on Garvey. And Garvey used to stand on 125th and Lenox and get up on a soapbox with a flag and give a lecture. And they said you could hear him all the way down to 129th. He never carried more than $100 on his person. So they couldn't accuse him of fraud or mismanagement or tax evasion. He would pass the hat at one of his soapbox speeches and raise the money to get to wherever he needed to go. Now, Marcus Garvey had chapters in 38 states and 72 foreign countries of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. He had the Black Factories Corporation that employed 6,000 African Americans. He had UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, universities or schools across the country. In fact, Elijah Muhammad was sentenced to prison in Sandstone, Minnesota, for enrolling his children in the UNIA school in Detroit. And the original member of the Diggs family, people will remember Charles Diggs in Congress, his father ran on the UNIA ticket and was elected to the Michigan State Legislature. There is so much that we could say about Marcus Garvey. Let me just add one final thought. One of the most frequently abused pieces of misinformation about Marcus Garvey was that he wanted everybody to go back to Africa. That is not true. He wanted skilled Negroes to return to Africa, to teach, to heal, to construct, to organize, to guide, to build. He wanted architects, lawyers, doctors, teachers, dentists, people who had something to contribute with value-added benefit to help liberate the continent. And I talked about the young white lawyer who had graduated from law school and went to work for the Justice Department. He had 12 people on Marcus Garvey's payroll for 12 years before they came up with that bogus charge of mail fraud. And we would not learn about the shenanigans of that white lawyer for 40 years when he called Martin Luther King a communist and the most notorious lawyer in America. Tell people who that young white lawyer was who railroaded Marcus Garvey.
J. Edgar Hoover, none other.
With his girdle-wearing, nylon panty self. Right. Okay. And took him 12 years to come up with a bogus charge like selling shares in the Black Star steamship line was purchased to help ferry Black people with skills back to the continent to help lift, well, like he said, up you mighty race. And that was a contribution that he wanted to make to the continent. He met with the Ku Klux Klan and said, I am as violently anti-white as you are anti-Negro, but my anti-whiteness is based on pro-Blackness, not simply hating white people or wanting to do them harm. We will defend ourselves. We will protect ourselves. We will advance and develop ourselves. The State Department met with the heads of the government in Liberia and said, if you meet with Marcus Garvey about bringing these Black skilled people back to Africa, we will punish this colony for the next 1,000 years, okay? And they refused to meet with Marcus Garvey when he talked about creating a space in which these Black professionals could land, could organize, and then could disseminate across the continent, providing goods and services. There was a song in the 1920s that the blacks in the military created. And it said, every race has a flag except a coon. So Marcus Garvey created the red, black, and green flag. Okay. Kwame Nkrumah used those colors on the flag of Ghana when he declared its independence. And he used to come to Harlem and sleep in the subways, okay, to learn about the UNIA and how to take those lessons back to Ghana and use them to promote the independence of the second independent African country after Ethiopia. Haile Selassie was the first. So, Shirley Chisholm's father was an organizer in the Garvey movement. Malcolm X's father was murdered. They took a streetcar and ran over his face and his head a dozen times for organizing for the UNIA in Omaha. When you look at Black people who went into politics or who learned as part of this continuum, from Martin R. Delaney to Frederick Douglass to, John Brown, the list just goes on and on. But at Marcus Garvey, okay, in the early part of the last century, that movement reached its zenith and scared the bejesus out of the white power structure. They had to trump charges and come up with some way to get him out of circulation because the man was too tough, okay, and the evidence is too thoroughly documented to debate. So I apologize for going on, but as I said, we could talk for an hour just about Marcus Garvey. And if people want to learn more, there's a book called Marcus Garvey and the Ideological Struggles of the UNIA, and it's written by Dr. Tony Martin, who was a professor at the University of Minnesota back in the 1970s for a short period, a couple of years. And Tony is very prominent in the Black Power, Black nationalist discussions and, continuum, but it's called Race First by Dr. Tony Martin. And it is the most detailed account of the life, the contributions, and the struggles of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, man. Okay, off the top of my head, just a few jewels of what this man was about, what he represented, and what he meant to the organizing in our community. Okay, the red, black, and the green. We still, it's like when we finish a prayer today, what's the last word we say?
Amen.
We're still praying to African gods. Amen. Ra, Coptic faith, and don't even realize it. So we got to look at our experience, our struggle, our development, not just our survival, as part of a continuum. And all of us are standing on the shoulders of the generation who came before us. So don't tell me this ain't your grandma's civil rights movement or struggle or NAACP or none of that, because they did the best they could with what they had, and we benefit from it to this day, to the very last drop.
Thank you, Yusef. That's wonderful and powerful. Let me share with you. I'll share a screen here again. I think I started off showing the cover of the upcoming Inside News, but I'll show you that again, and even the inside of the publication. Let's see. Let me go back here a little bit. Well, here you can see a page 3 story that talks about this idea of pardon, Marcus Garvey. And I say, I'm going to be looking and reading this. People often ask why Inside News' North Minneapolis headquarters is called the Marcus Garvey House. Here's why. When we purchased this elegant mini mansion in the 1990s, the building was in a neighborly gentry kind of way known as the Terra Mansion. We acquired the property to house our family-run newspaper business. Terra was the fictional plantation found in Margaret Mitchell's 1936 novel, Gone with the Wind, and was located near Jonesboro, Georgia, as the locale of the final decisive defeat of the Confederate defenders in the Battle of Jonesboro. Jonesboro and its surrounding farmland realized historical significance. In the novel, Gone with the Wind, the plantation was founded by Irish immigrant Gerald O'Hara when he won a Section of land from the absentee owners during an all-night poker game. Very much an Irish peasant farmer rather than a merchant like his elder brothers, whose immigrations to Savannah brought him to Georgia. He wanted, like they wanted him to be. Gerald relished the thought of being a planter and gave his mostly wilderness and uncultivated new lands the grandiose name of Tara, after the hill of Tara, once the capital of the High King of ancient Ireland. He borrowed money from his brothers and bankers to buy slaves, and over several years turned the farm into a very successful cotton plantation. So I went to a grand screech, in my mind, in my spirit, my heart, at the notion of buying slaves and the profitability of the plantation. And now that I own the property, Yusef, the question pops up: slaves, cotton.
Tell people where it's located, Al.
Well, the Marcus
In the
Garvey
heart of
House
the
is
hood.
in North Minneapolis, 1815 Bryan Avenue North, in the center of the Black community. And the point I'm making is in the next paragraph I'm going to read. It says, the smug fondness of this historicity of slavery obviously did not sit right with us, meaning that people in the neighborhood were smilingly proud to have Tara among them. They saw that as a sign of accomplishment, of gentility, and they would have the neighborhood tours and say, oh, this is the Tara Mansion. Well, what goes with that? All the things associated with our status in that social structure, that status being the enslaved, the exploited, the murdered, right? The chained, and those that our society sought to permanently cripple and or exterminate. And so we looked at our own culture and heritage to find a suitable name for our properties. What I wrote, I say that my grandfather, Roland McFarlane, and the McFarlane family originated in St. Anne's Parish, Jamaica. Marcus Garvey was born there in 1887. We can trace our McFarlane lineage in this parish to about 1832. And it's inconceivable to me that there was no connection between the McFarlanes and the Garveys. I cannot imagine my ancestors not being on the front line of Pan-Africanism and Black liberation, the resistance and also in the resistance, or not being in the resistance to the international criminal enterprise of human trafficking and enslavement. And though I do not have direct records of such involvement, I trust the indwelling sensibility that made it plain to me that we should name our facility the Marcus Garvey House, a tribute to African audacity and confidence that continues to bear fruit globally today. So that's why the inside office is called the Marcus Garvey House. It's more than, it's a feeling and more, and it's a tribute to who we are and to the pride, to the audacity that I believe characterizes our unending movement towards making the planet a better place for all human beings. Well,
part of that continuum.
Yeah, there we go. Listen, Thomas Berry is here. Thomas Berry and I had a great conversation this morning. I see Angela Rose. Angela, good to see you again. Been a long time. And Brenda Lyle is here. I want to bring everybody in so we can all jump in this conversation, but I want to go straight to Brother Thomas Berry. We talked this morning about a new app he's developed called 12 Watch. And I'm telling you that he had to school me in describing what 12 Watch meant. And so he said, 12 watch, I'm thinking about a watch on your wrist, 12 o'clock. He said, no, 12 is the new word for young people for police. Well, last I heard, Brother Berry, 5-0 was the police. That's how far back I go. It's 12. And he's created an app called 12 Watch. Let me just go straight to you, brother. I had a great conversation with you this morning, and I was just hopeful that you were able to fix your schedule to be in this program today. You talk about what your vision is, what the concept is, and just to kick it with my group of friends here, because I think everybody here is conscious, and I think our audiences are conscious, and we all are looking for, striving to find ways to move our people forward. Thomas Berry, talk about, good afternoon, brother, and talk about 12 Watch.
Well, good afternoon. First, I want to say thank you for having me on, and I was enjoying the conversation about Marcus Garvey. I think a lot of times we fail in my generation and the ones after me is that we kind of forget that a lot of the blueprint of what we have to do was already laid. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. What we find out is everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel, and we're not necessarily looking at those who laid it all out for us. And Marcus was the most successful out of all of us with the membership that he had in the UNIA. And that's something that we have to keep in mind. And we don't have to talk about BIPOC or anything else. We can talk solely for ourselves. So I'm glad that you guys talked about Marcus, because right now, when it comes to Black liberation, we have been watered down so much by 501c3 money. We will say anything. You know, someone could put a color, you know, they'll say Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Well, we know who the original people of color were, A. And B, sitting in rooms with Native Americans, they don't want us speaking on their behalf about any topic whatsoever, because they claim sovereignty and they're different than other minority groups. So when you put Black folks and Native Americans and then you say people of color, you've disrespected both groups, because we all know that we all, both natives as well as Black folk or African American, we end up at the back end of all of this people of color conversation. So we don't need to be at the back of the bus for that. Marcus Garvey is the reason why we need to push forward, and we need to march with that spirit. With that being said, this app is in the vein of Marcus Garvey, seeing what happened with George Floyd, seeing what's happening with Dante Wright, as well as a levy of other Black men and women around the country. This app is an app that is so that the citizens can take back the power themselves with the power of the cell phone. We would not have known what happened to George Floyd if it wasn't for that young teenager who had her cell phone out. Without her recording the events, we would have had to be dependent upon the police officer's body camera, and it's not always a guarantee that the body cameras are on or the
Thomas,
yes,
Thomas,
sir.
excuse me, and the lie that they distributed that he died as a result of pre-existing medical conditions, which they had to back up, like Michael Jackson doing the moonwalk.
Yes, sir.
After several million people looked at the video and saw right through that glass lunch bucket that they were carrying.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Sorry, brother. You know.
Yes, sir. And that's because we got to remember with Sandra Bland brother passing away, we couldn't see what happened to Sandra Bland inside of the police station. So they're telling us that it's suicide, but more than likely that sister did not hang herself. They hung her. And so what this app allows us to do is to use that power of our cell phone, and we can record police officers. And as I told Brother Al, you actually get to meet the cops before the cops meet you. We have compiled a lot of public records of police officers who have violated citizens' rights. A lot of it is lawsuits, etc. And we have put them into a database that is GPS driven. So when you drive into the 3rd precinct, 1st precinct, 2nd precinct, or 1st precinct, you will get a notification on your phone if you have this app of those cops who are in constant violation of citizens' rights before you even meet them. You'll know their badge number, their squad car, even the history of the things that they have done. And we're doing this because we believe that one of the things that we've seen the most was that once our people make these complaints, a lot of it is thrown out, but a lot of these cops have a lot of history. Once we go into court, I was telling Brother Al McFarlane earlier today, we had a brother who got shot 9 times and they paid him $998 for being shot 9 times here in the state of Minnesota. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive up not only the civil costs, but we also want to keep a running tracker, because we don't want cops to be able to quit the Minneapolis police force, go out to Fridley, and still do the same thing to Black people in Fridley. And so that's kind of what we're trying to push with this app. We want to make sure that we partner up with the Black Lives Matters and other social groups who are watch groups of the police inside of urban cities around the country. But we feel like our people have to take the control into our hand. We can't depend on other people to do right by us, because if they would have been done it a long time ago.
The idea that you have has levels and levels and levels. Number one, I told you how much I appreciated the fact that you are approaching solving a problem, which I think is an entrepreneurial skill, from the point of view of an LLC as a business. You are not launching a non-for-profit, and I have no problem with nonprofit and NGOs, but I think that we also have to have other tools and strategies. And so your team has created an LLC. You're approaching this problem as a business opportunity. Our health and our safety, Thomas Berry, I say, should be our business. Our health is our business. Right now, our health or lack of health, our lack of safety has been somebody else's business, and we suffer for it. And so for you to flip that, change the dynamic, change the script and say, you know what, uh, we have to be accountable. We have to be owners of our safety, of our freedom, of our defense, of our awareness. And we'll use technology to create capability in that arena, and to do that in a way that's profitable as well, is, I think, expansive and progressive and forward thinking. So you've created a business, but the business has a planned benefit of supporting other activity that brings more discussion, more critical thinking, more learning and opportunity in our community in this arena. Now, I'm teasing the idea, but you talk about what you said this morning about how you want to encourage debating, for example, how you want to put more of our people who love to talk and love to argue in a vein of argument that produces substantive and ongoing change for our people. Go ahead, Thomas Berry.
Yes, sir. We definitely want to redivest a portion of this money that we get from the app back into the community in two ways. One of the first three ways, I should say. One of the ways is that we want to create debate groups with young school-age children, because our kids love to argue. And we want them to retain, recite, as well as research. And we know that this is a way for them to get college scholarships, because if you're on a debate team, the average debater has a 3.5 GPA. This is more effective than putting them into an AAU basketball team or on a football team. But we want to make sure that we get more Black lawyers into the courtroom so that we can start fighting at on a legal level some of these things, so we can change things. The other things we want to do is we want to also redivest into those organizations that we talked about earlier, like the Black Lives Matter, et cetera. We want to make sure that we keep these fights going. And I know I'm saying Black Lives Matter because they're the perennial, but all civil groups that are watch groups for Black folks and other groups as well, when it comes to watching the 12, we need to make sure that people are funded. Last but not least, we want to get more Black. We want to make sure that we put people on scholarships as well. We want to make sure that we're pushing people more into law schools, because the one thing in this country that we've never gotten from politicians is substantial change. Most of our changes in this country have come in the courtroom. So we need to have more lawyers. We need to have more unapologetic lawyers, because when you're talking about nonprofit, the issue is that nonprofit has watered down a lot of our liberation talk, a lot of our liberation action, because once they give you the money, Brother Al, they now own you. So we need to make sure that we redivest into ourselves, and we make sure that those folks go in without any attachments to white supremacy.
I see Dr. Irma Mclaren has joined us. Dr. Irma, good to see you. Angela, let me have you respond first of all, and then bring Dr. Irma in. How are you doing, Angela? I haven't seen you in a bit. Good to see you again. What's on your mind, and respond to the ideas presented either on Marcus Garvey or the app that Brother Barry is talking about.
Yes, no, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for always extending the invitation. I definitely agree that in a lot of ways, the issue of the police misconduct and brutality can never be accurately measured until we actually get our own data out there, because we cannot trust the ways that police monitor themselves. You know, that's just a fact. We've seen cover-ups, we've seen, and just how the mishandling of cases, of police misconduct cases, perpetuates police misconduct in and of itself, because the police have no desire. They have no desire to monitor themselves. So that's something that I 100% agree that citizens and especially that we have an obligation to record and to make sure that these instances of police misconduct are written down or recorded on video, however we can, because we'll never know the full extent of the issue until we actually have accurate measures and accurate data. Also, I would say, this is something that a lot of people try to do in a lot of different ways, right? So you can have the public testimony aspect of it. You can have the recording of it. And being a witness to police misconduct for an individual might be scary, because you don't know how then there'll be a retaliation. And so having an app like this can offer some sense of security and safety instead of having to publish it on your own, like Facebook or something, which also Facebook in and of itself and Twitter as well as Instagram, they have algorithms that can actively and have during the protests, during the uprisings, right, after the murder of George Floyd and Dante, right, they actively suppressed Black organizers who were trying to go live to showcase what was happening in the protests. They actively, the algorithm actively, they call it shadow ban. And this shadow banning really, actually, you might have a following of, multiple thousands of people, but if you post something that is seen as controversial by the algorithm, it could also just only be seen by a couple dozen instead of the full breadth of your followership. And so these are issues where social media is not a neutral party, it's a company. And so regular social media formats aren't what we should rely on to get the voice of the people and the experiences of Black people out into the world. So that's just something that I'll say that, actively connects with the unfortunate reality that we're in. Of you're wondering why Black Lives Matter was so hot for a moment, and then it seems like you're on Twitter, you're on social media, and nobody's talking about it. People could still be talking about it, but the algorithm has changed to the point where you're actually getting more ads than you are getting actual pertinent information, or you're getting more disinformation and misinformation.
Whoops, you're locked up, Angela.
A society like that, but it's something to note as well.
Dr. Irma, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. I'm talking to everybody from Mobile, Alabama, where I'm visiting a relative of mine, my mother's last living sibling. So I'm here in Mobile.
Good to see you as always. What's your impression, your thoughts? One of the things that I will always remember is that when I first met you, you turned the light bulb on in my head about data and research. I just either hadn't given it much thought, or I had the layman's suspicion of data as a tool of the oppressor, of research based on the experience and the limited knowledge that I had, being a tool to justify the continued marginalization of our people, the exclusion in policy and practice of against Black people. You kind of talked about how we can use this technology, use the tools, use the practice to advance our analysis of what happened and our analysis of what can happen and will happen, data-driven action. So I always want to acknowledge that your position and your knowledge in that area has been important to me personally, but I think to all those people that you teach and touch as an educator and as a leader.
Well, thank you, Al. And I want to give props to the young man, who is developing this app. I think the issue is, like any platform, any medium, it's a double-edged sword. Just as newspapers were used to suppress and oppress, and promote white supremacy, and Black newspapers emerged out of that in order to give a different voice, a different perspective. Books can be used to promote oppression, but they also can be used to liberate. And technology is no different. It's just a different medium and platform. That kind of surveillance of police bad behavior can also then be turned around to look at other people's bad behavior, everybody's bad behavior. And so the question is about privacy, about people's right do people have a right to have bad behavior and not have it captured? I think we have to understand that whatever we do, while it has a good outcome, it also can be turned against us. This app could then be used by anyone because you don't necessarily know who's downloading it. Police can then use it to capture protesters who might be engaging. Not everybody who is a protester necessarily is doing good behavior. There's some folks who are being very destructive as well as a form of protest. We should not forget that one of the challenges of the Chinese Revolution is that children, families were asked to report on each other. And, that has an implication. So I think whatever we're doing in here, while it has a good side, we also have to understand that it can be used in ways for which it was never intended. And that is the challenge, I think, with anything, any form of medium, whether it's social media. We're now seeing the downside of that, that it can be manipulated just like any form of data and any kind of medium. It can be used for its own end. So I think we just have to keep that in mind.
Dr. Irma, many law enforcement agencies are currently using body-worn cameras for exactly that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
They're using facial recognition for exactly that purpose. And when it comes to women of color and the darker one's complexion is, the greater the error rate is in
Yes.
facial recognition. So I think the fact that Thomas Berry and his compatriots have come up with a way for us to use the technology is noteworthy, because many law enforcement agencies do not require the people wearing the body-worn cameras to inform the subjects of the material that they videotape that they have a right to view that videotape, because they are the subject to listen to that audio tape before they sign a statement or make a
Right.
confession or participate in an interview. But many police departments allow, and some even require, that the police review the body-worn camera footage before they participate in an interview or write their initial report or statement, which tilts the entire conversation in favor of law enforcement, not in favor
yes.
of the
And
people who are supposed to be protected, those of us who called for body-worn camera in the first place, so we didn't have to rely on 17-year-old girls with their 7-year-old nephew happenstance coming upon George Floyd with somebody's knee on his neck and urine running down his legs and down the gutter down the street.
And I don't disagree with you. What I'm simply saying is that data can also be manipulated. And as someone who I serve as an expert witness. I've done some cases now that have to do with implicit bias. And I can tell you for true that body cam data can be manipulated. And then what happens is that when it does not support the case that they want, it either disappears, or the audio becomes inaudible, or they bring in someone else to interpret material and say, well, we think that this says this, but we think there's another perspective. And I guess my point is that we should understand that even these apps that we create for our own, because you're right, who wants to subject someone to that kind of trauma? But the point is that when we create these apps can be used by anyone for any purposes. The designers of this have no way of knowing who's purchasing the app or who's downloading it. And so we don't know the whole scope of what it can be used for. So it has a tremendous positive power. It gives people the sense that they can have a level of anonymity. But again, it can also be used by other people who are trying to critique or disregard the kinds of actions that people in the Black Lives Matter movement are taking. So there's always that risk.
I ran a public policy research organization, and one of the first realizations that I came to was that the data will confess to anything if you torture it long enough.
That's right. That's right.
So great care is required and clearly, suggested.
I will also say that we're probably moving toward, as a legally in the legal procedures, probably moving toward a space where video to be submitted as evidence probably has to meet certain parameters to show that it's not like deep faked or things like that. Since, fakes are unfortunately also something that is rampant, and that can also be used to undermine legitimate video. And so one of the things that even testimony, something of a witness testimony, that is something where organizers like myself and researchers want to gather as much testimony to someone's witnessing of police misconduct. There's still certain parameters, legal parameters, if you want to go and have that testimony to be submitted to like the UN or even the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. There's still certain parameters that that testimony has to meet. And so we're probably going to be seeing that with video, because as the moment that you create an app that shows more information that prosecutors and the legal criminal system doesn't want, to be admitted into, that invalidates police states, that's going to be the moment you're going to see these additional parameters trying to discredit and undercut all of these moments of evidence. So it's unfortunate, but these are things that Thomas, you have a great idea. These are the little small nitpicking things that we're seeing, because just like you said, of not reinventing the wheel, our opposition doesn't reinvent the wheel in how they try to undermine our voices. And
right.
So these are learned. These are learned and historically seen ways and documented ways that they've tried to undercut our movement. So right. Just like we're not reinventing the wheel, we can't reinvent the wheel to how we address our opposition.
Right. I think we have to be very involved in getting in the game of utilizing technology. I work with, some of the people I know, have been promoting how we utilize it, because historically we've just been consumers of it. So I think the fact that you're building apps, that you are, utilizing the technology towards an agenda that promotes what you believe in and what you trust is really important. And the more that we can educate our youth about the importance of knowing how to use this technology becomes critical. Absolutely.
Well, I want to say this, a couple of things. I'm a chess player. So I understand when I move upon a square, I know that it is going to be a reaction. And that is the reason why we have other things set in place, because we need more lawyers in the courtroom in the first place. And we're not funding enough of our young men and women to be in the courtroom, but they are arguing at home with nothing else to do. So that's why we want to make sure that we get these debate clubs going, as well as those young men and women that want to be attorneys. We want to make sure they get in schools with Black dollars so they can do Black work. That's the most important thing. The other thing that I want to state too is we have to also look at institution building, because we always talk about racism, as just one thing. This is why this is a LLC and not a nonprofit, because we're trying to build an institution and take that money from that institution to build and support and sustain other institutions that are important to us, because that's the only other way that we can buffer ourselves from it. A lot of it is we don't own anything, we just participate. What we're saying is, no, let's put the power into our hand. And yes, if they get mad, if they stump their feet, if they hold their breath and protest, that's okay. We have to be able to use the hammer or the nail for what we want to use it for. If we're using it to build and they're trying to use it to tear it down, that's their business. We have to just keep on building. That's what we have to do. So I always do things, I'm a fighter. If I'm getting in a fight, I know I plan to get punched, but my job is to throw more punches. And that's just what we have to do as a people. And so that's what this app is. This gives us that punch, because a lot of what our people will have for evidence is that a lot of these people, over 150 TSOs inside of the Twin Cities.
TSO is what?
They are training superior officers who are training cadets coming off. They are people who have violated citizens' rights. Derek Chauvin, he was training someone when he killed George Floyd. So was Kim Potter when she killed Dante Wright. So they're training people how to violate citizens' rights. And so what we're doing is, on this app, when this cop space populate, you have the history of this cop, right? So that's your first witness. These are things that are already under testimony in previous law cases that you'll have access to, that you don't have to pay for. We've done the research. We've done that already. So you go into court with that information. So if someone's going to lie and say whatever, well, hey, you got previous testimony from this cop. Have you said this once before? Because a lot of our people can afford attorneys who have PIs that can go out and find this information. We're bringing this directly to you. And just like Facebook or Facebook Live video, all citizens will see this video, be able to chime in. And if they have history with that cop, they'll be able to chime in on that as well. So what we're trying to do is we're just trying to make that village that we have, we're just trying to equip it with more weapons to protect itself as well as fight back.
Let me jump in right there. I mean, that idea, Brother Thomas Berry, seems powerful to me for these reasons. Number one is that the society, the social structure, always tries to convince us that when something happens to us, it's just happening to us individually, that you personally, Al McFarlane, were the unfortunate victim of, or perpetrator of, or miscreant, or whatever it is. And to convince me and those around me that my circumstance wasn't part of a broad, effusive, interminable system that entrapped, captured, dislodged the Al McFarlanes in the world. And so to the degree then that it is successful in convincing me that I am defective, deficient, at fault, guilty, then that maintains the power of the social structure and dampens anybody's ability to question whether the structure itself is guilty of the destruction of all of our lives, and even the ultimate long-term disservice of those for whom the structure itself was created, because it limits their ability to become better, decent human beings. So I think to the degree that you are saying, we can talk to each other differently and broadly and instantly without the filter and without the approval of those who tell us not to trust our lying eyes, right? When we looked at George Floyd and they wanted to tell us, don't believe that this was murder.
Right.
They wanted us to believe and find some rationale to say, oh, this was okay. That's what they really tried to do, is tell us not to believe our own eyes as we watch this man murdered by Derek Chauvin and supported by the accomplices. And so, as you said, it's fortunate that this young person was there with the tools and with the fortitude to go live and to capture this. And you're trying to, in my view, ramp that up from the one of to the standard, where everybody is both attuned, aware, prepared to document and to communicate and to ensure that there is a global awareness, an instant understanding of another assault on our humanity, our dignity. And I think that's a powerful idea. It reminds me, you can be in your store somewhere now and all of a sudden your cell phone goes off, bleep, 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 Amber Alert. How many have that? How many of us have had that happen where you all of a sudden your phone goes haywire, your TV goes haywire, and it's the system properly letting everybody know something foul has gone down, pay attention. And you're saying that we can use that same technology on behalf of ourselves, our people, our children, our brothers, our sisters. When something foul is going down, instantly communicate that to the entire universe of us and others too, because they need to know that what they have done, what somebody among them is doing, is wrong. And we know it. And you can't tell us to say it's okay. So what do you think?
Al, can I ask two practical questions?
Sure.
Brother Berry, how large is your current database and how do you input data into it? Is there a way for people to provide video that they take, or are you capturing all of the information that's available?
Well, thanks for that question. So far, we got over 200 plus officers in the Twin Cities who are at, it starts off at 5 points or higher in violation for various things, violating citizens' rights. So we have over 200 cops so far in the database, and people can upload videos to our site. What we do is we take that information and we try to erase all markers that would let someone else know who it was who made the video. So if it's audio of the person that's recording, we try to take their voice out or any markers that know exactly, where they, what they look like, etc. So we try to remove that. And people can also email us, or contact us or call me directly if they know me in the Twin Cities, because we're just in the Twin Cities now. And if they have information, we're willing to not only take that information, but also do more research so we can make sure that we have practical, accurate information out as much as we can. Because a lot of our stories, what happens with a lot of these officers, go untold. And so we have to make sure that we're protecting these people because it's a traumatic experience. We also need to make sure that we're doing our due diligence, because we don't want to put any false information out, because that's what they would be looking for, the first piece of false information. That's why we went to their records first and foremost. So when they say something's wrong, well, you go back to the courts and you go talk to them about what you said under oath.
You're assembling court data, public data, and making it available in a way that's not currently packaged, and making it available to people. When you talked this morning, I had the picture, Brother Thomas, that I could be driving from downtown towards the 4th precinct, and all of a sudden your app gives me a profile of how many cops are on the job at this time who have records of doing things for which there have been charges made. And so it gives me a sense of the safety or lack of safety environment that I'm in at the moment. Am I saying that the right way? Is that what you told me?
Yes, sir. That's exactly it. We want you to meet them before they meet you. And we're going to let you know the range of danger that you're in with dealing with them, sort of like they do sexual predators. We need to know exactly who our tax dollars are going to, who are we paying for. A lot of times we often say that we want more Black cops on the beat. Doing this research, I got stories where, 2 Black cops knock on a Black door, a Black family. They knock the dad out, they knock the mom out, they beat the children, right? And they got paid out $5,000 in court. Now, I don't know about you, but if someone is knocking on your door at 2 a.m. in the morning and they beat up both parents, or knock out both parents and beat 3 teenagers, and by the way, they had the wrong address when they did all of this. These stories get swept up under the rug. No one says anything about it. And then we come back and say, well, we need more Black cops. Well, what kind of Black cops do we want on the force? What kind of people in general do we want on the force? So our goal is so you are made aware of the dangers in your community. And the other side of it, too, is when the mayors come around and they give you conversations about how great the force is, you can now talk to them about specific officers. Now you don't have to necessarily say, well, just cops. You can go down and name names. You can name violations of that cop, and you can ask, hey, how does this person still have a badge? When is
you can say Derek Chauvin had 17 complaints against him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And never was fired or whatever, right? Go ahead, Brenda.
I have a quick question, Mr. Berry. It's early in the game. He was just sworn in on the 8th of August. But what do you plan to, or how do you plan to connect with Commissioner Cedric Alexander?
Well, thanks for asking that, Ms. Gray. I would say this, I plan on sitting down talking to all leaders, Black, white, whatever, about how we can. No one benefits from bad policing. But what I would tell him more than anybody else, you have to always make sure when you come into a place where you don't know the history of what happened. I was in high school when Tycel Nelson was murdered. And I remember that. And I remember those cops getting a badge, not a badge, but a medal for murdering my brother. So, when you come and you talk and you're from a different place, you got to understand we got culture here, bad policing. So when I talk to him, I'm not coming to him, talking to him from a place of pleading with him. I want to work with him, but I want him to understand nobody benefits from bad policing. Not the police, not the citizens, not Black folks, not white folks, because these bad cops, not only are they bad when they got a badge on, they're also in their private lives, terrorizing their wives, their children, and everything else. You expect them to show up to someone else's house, to answer a call for domestic violence, but they're at home beating their wives. And that's why a lot of these domestic violence calls, when you talk to a lot of these women, that's why the cops just knock, they look, and then they leave, and the man is free to be beating on the woman after they leave. So we have to make sure intentionally that we are, when we're talking to these leaders, that they understand, just like they have a objective that they're paid for, we as citizens have an objective to make sure we get the right type of policing.
And I think it's, go ahead.
Well, we just don't want we don't want them to stamp a Black face on our destruction.
I don't think you will with him, though, because Atlanta had just as bad of a group of bad cops, and he did about 4 years with it. But I think that when you talk about leaders, you're going to have to address strongly his background, the fact that he's got 5 or 6 different departments under him, and this is going to take time to gel.
Yes, ma'am.
But I think you could be of a great asset to him. And so I think to put in perspective just how you would approach a Commissioner Dr. Cedric Alexander, because you have to look at his books. He writes about it. He's got 2 of them. And I looked at some of the reviews, and he's tough. And I don't think Jacob Fry took Angela really, she said, I think we thought about this a long time ago. And then here comes the mayor saying, this is what we're going to do, but it's done. And so utilize it and be able to approach him in a manner that's candid, and that this is, George Floyd's spirit is here. And you have to address it.
So I would address him, and I would pray that he's not being what they call castled.
No, I don't think you'll find that.
And the reason why I state that is because a leader is only as good as the people that supporting them. And I can tell you, just looking at work in the counties, when they talk about racial equity, the department heads say racial equity, but the people that work with everyday folk, that's not what they believe in. And so what you get is the department says one thing, and the folks that's working the day-to-day is doing something different. And what happens is the folks, our Black folks, the common people, are dealing with the day-to-day people. It's not trickling down. So what I would ask him, not necessarily what this app could do, I would ask him a couple of things. What is his targeted goal? What do you want to do? What are the numbers you're looking to reduce by? And what is the date? Because that's what we would ask anyone with a corporation. What happens with government is they come out, they give some nice speeches. They'll tell us their books. We can buy their books. We can also read their essays of what they did in college. But the goal is, what is the targeted date on the How can we hold you accountable if this does not happen? And do you have the people working up under you that have the will to do what you want that is done? Because I don't want to blame that brother for what was happening before he got here. Jacob Fry brought him here. Kudos to Jacob. But I'm just fearful that my brother may be castled. I'm not looking to be adversarial with him. So when we sit down and we talk, I'll tell him what the app does. He'll tell me what he do. And I say, hey, how can we meet in the middle? Because in the end, no one benefits from bad cops. And we're not targeting policing. We're targeting bad policing. So if someone is a good cop and they're not doing anything wrong, we don't want to target that person. We don't want to interfere with that person doing their job. I have family that live in North Minneapolis. I have a girlfriend that live in North Minneapolis. I've sat and listened to 40 shots at night, and I have not seen a squad car. I don't want them not policing our communities and keeping babies fearful of being shot playing in their yards. So our goal is to get them to do what they're getting paid to do and not reenact what happened on the plantation. So that's
perhaps what he can introduce. Culture change is hard. It doesn't just happen with, you bring in the right leader, but you still have a whole culture that has to be deconstructed. And, we talk about bad policing, but we haven't talked about how many of them have degrees in criminal justice and what is the curriculum that teaches. So the leadership, transformational leadership is about vision. It's about intellectual stimulation. It's about looking at individualized consideration, not doing a broad sweep, but looking at the ways in which individual cops are operating. And as you say, not painting them all with the same brush, right? And it is about idealized influence. How do you influence the other people who are supposed to be supporting you, who may not be in the police department, to support the vision that you have of some kind of transformational change? But it takes time. It's not going to happen just because you bring in someone new, because he's got a whole culture now he has to deal with and address and understand. And I think, Thomas, that's where you can come in, is to give him the information so that he's not blindsided, to say, here's the data that we've gotten from public records that's been collected. These are people you need to take a look at.
I don't think he's blindsided, Dr. Irma. I didn't say.
Yeah. I mean, he can't know everything. He just got here.
No.
Saying that the information, that the data that Thomas has collected can be valuable to him, because there's no way he can walk in and have known everything. So he can be blindsided. So that's just my point, is that data becomes information for him to sort of utilize in an effective way to move towards whatever agenda of change he wants to be able to do it. But it's important data, and people who are not being looked at positively, they're not going to just walk up and give him those data. So if Thomas can provide him with data, that gives him more information, to be able to implement the kinds of change policies that he wants to. Otherwise, every leader can be blindsided, no matter how smart you are. And you can always be blindsided. And I know that for a fact.
How do we access the app?
So what we're doing is we're going to do a launch by Labor Day. And we're going to, I'm the program director of Black Civic Network. So what we're going to do, a guerrilla style, we're going to be knocking on people's doors and getting them to sign up for free. And so we're going to show them how to work, how to activate the app, the whole nine. And that's what we're going to do. We're just going to go out. We're going to talk directly to the people, not just Black folks, but all people, and getting everybody activated and say, hey, this is our way as citizens. Because when we pay these lawsuits out, that's just more taxes that we take away from schools. That's more taxes that we take away from more lights and other things that we need as a civic structure. So we just want to talk directly to the people as well as those who run the government. We're open to all conversations, Ms. Brenda. As I say, I'm like a chimney. I want all the smoke. I'm not ducking.
Well, I tell you what, I just wrote about him, and what I'd like to have come back from you is what your reflections were, how you felt after meeting with him, whether it's confidence or what you shared with him, or how you felt, or how you feel that 12 Watch is working. I'd like to hear back from you, because I did do an article on him, and I did review his books. The books didn't matter. It was what he said and how he and Jacob Fry came together on this, because this man's been doing research long before August 8th, even before he decided that he was going to assume this job. I asked some people in the Metro Atlanta about him, and it was a different perspective than I anticipated. He's serious. He didn't take this lightly. So, normally first impressions aren't that strong, but he was. So we'll see. But get back with me. I'd like to hear what you think.
I will certainly do that. I'll sit down and talk to him. Like I said, I'm open to talk to everyone, but I will certainly intentionally reach out to him. I know Brother Al Flowers and others who have channels to him, and sit down and say we can do some lunch and have a conversation. But I implore us in general as a people to talk directly to ourselves more than anything.
And use the young people. That young people's task force is strong. And if they believe in you, and that's Al Flowers Jr. and, a group of young people that tried to get the youth center and everything going. They've been working awfully hard. So, you've got some ammunition that could help you out there. And I'm an outsider, but I think that it makes sense, because if we had known about the 14-year-old that Derek Chauvin had done the same thing to, maybe, George might have still been here. We just don't know.
We're out of time. Good conversation. Let's close with a round of what you all are reading, what you're thinking about. So I'm going to go to Angela first. You read anything new, Angela? What's on your book stand?
Yes, on my book stand, I'm actually reading Pachinko, which is a story of a Korean family during Japanese occupation. And it's fantastic novel, fictional, of course. And then also, if you are not interested in reading the book, it's on Apple TV, the TV show now. So Pachinko is a Japanese arcade game. So it's a really great novel centered around the women in the family, as well as the men, and how they navigate the Japanese occupation during right before World War II and during World War II of Korea. So yeah, it's a great book.
Who is the author, Angela?
The author is Min Jin Lee. a Korean American author.
Spell Jenzie.
Minjinlee.
Okay. Thank
You
you.
look good wearing that Miami sunshine, Angela.
She does look good.
Thank you.
Brenda, what are you reading?
I'm not. I'm working.
Okay, you're working. All right. Thank you.
Day
Cool.
and night.
Dr. Irma, what you reading?
Believe it or not, I'm revisiting Jane Eyre, by Charlotte Bronte, because there's an adaptation of her play that's going to be at Jiva Theater in Rochester, New York, and they've asked me to do the keynote. And so I'm going to be understanding Jane Austen through a Black feminist lens. The question I'm asking myself is, having grown up with that literature, which I used to teach before I went into anthropology, I taught literature. And of course, I love sort of Victorian Gothic kinds of literature, is where are the Black people? And so I'm trying to now imagine at that period of time who would have been there. So, Anna Cooper was also during that same period. And so I'm sort of beginning to try and imagine what might be a conversation, or what might a Black woman have been thinking about, and what would she have thought about in terms of looking at the character Jane Eyre and the trials and tribulations.
There's a theory that the mad woman in the attic is a mulatto woman.
Is what?
A mulatto woman.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because she's from the Caribbean originally, things like that. And so there's a theory about that around Jane Eyre. Well,
send that to me, and I hope we get a chance to meet when I come.
And they had a picture of her looking like Sally Hemings.
Yes.
She's in Miami, Dr. Irma, if you ever get down that way.
Who is it? Oh, you're in Miami now.
Yes, I am.
Okay, for good?
For good for now.
Married lady.
Yusef, what you reading, man?
I'm rereading Richard Wright's The Outsider, because it is the original definition of my surname. And every time I read it, I learn something new, Al.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Anything with Wright.
Yeah.
Thomas Berry, what's on your book stand?
I'm doing an audiobook right now. It's called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. And this book is by Tom O'Neill. And let me tell you, this book is so captivating because you find out that the whole Manson story and everything behind it, it was a part of an MK Ultra experiment by the FBI on Manson and his family. And secondly, they were trying to kick off a war with the Black Panthers because Manson was actually an FBI snitch.
And read the Glass House Papers, because that actually talks about, that was written by the person who actually infiltrated the Panthers and Radical.
Papers?
The Glass House Paper. The Glass House Papers.
Glass House Papers. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm reading this. I read already reading parts of it, a book, One World, and it's an anthology or a collection of short stories by African writers. And in particular, I'm reading an article by a sister named Molara Wood. She's a Nigerian journalist, a Yoruba woman, and happened to have met her online through a conversation with the Brazilian Descendant Association of Lagos. And so hopefully she'll be joining us at some point in time. But I'm also getting ready to get into this book called The Yoruba in Brazil. And the idea here is just to look at how Brazilian or Yoruba culture sustained itself and grew, about resilience of Yoruba in the New World. So that's what's on my reading book stand right now. Listen, always great.
That book. I'm going to buy that book. I want that book.
This is edited by Niyi Afolara and Toyin Falola, but it's called The Yoruba in Brazil.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Listen, great conversation. Brother Thomas, good to see you here, man. You're welcome to come back anytime. We'd love to keep updates on your work. We didn't get a chance to talk about how you finance this, and that you may be, looking for investors or grants or whatever to help grow this work, but we can do that at another time, because I think, there probably are ways that people who have experience and or capital that could bring some of the energy you need to bring forward this wonderful idea.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Make sure we have your email, Thomas.
Oh, yes, I will. Put it in the chat now.